Hi, I'm Chris Johnston, Principal Lawyer and Migration Agent with Work Visa Lawyers, and I'm going to be giving you an update on skilled migration news for Australia. The things I will cover today are family visa categories open again, new English language tests from November 2014, partner application processing times SOAR, the many government reviews, the 457 review and recommendations, the fee review, Victoria putting state sponsorship of ICT Occupations on hold, Tasmania, a great place to study and migrate. Family visa categories are open again. So there's been some good news. Senator Hanson-Young's motion was successful, and now a range of family visas which were ceased have been reopened. The categories that are reopened are the parent, remaining relative, age-dependent relative and carer visas. So this is great news for a range of Australians who might want to sponsor a relative for these categories. But there are some disclaimers. The first is that the government is not promising anything good in terms of processing times. So for the parent visa, they're currently estimating that it's going to take approximately 30 years for that visa to be successful. Now these estimates need to be taken with a pinch of salt because really, how can you predict what's going to happen in 30 years' time? So for the government to say that, there could easily be changes in the next 5 or 10 years which made the processing time shorter. So, but that said, at the moment, the processing times for these categories will be very long. However, you may have some reason to put this sort of visa in, such as if you were looking to get a bridging visa for your parent whilst they were here, and they could still enjoy their life in Australia with you. So that's the news. In terms of taking action, well, if you do want to put one of these visas in, it's probably a good idea to do it sooner rather than later. The reason for this is because the government may bring something new forward to limit the time that it's open. There is the window of opportunity is meant to be 6 months, but I wouldn't count on that. So that's what I can tell you about this positive development. New English language tests from November 2014. This is another positive development. Many applicants or potential applicants have done numerous IELTS tests and struggled to get through. Usually the standard requirement might be IELTS or 6s to go ahead with a skilled migration application. So from November, there's going to be 2 new approved tests. That will bring the number of tests that you could do up to 4. So the currently approved tests are the IELTS and the OET. The new tests are going to be the TOEFL and the Pearson. And from January next year, they will also be adding the Cambridge test. So that will take the number of tests to 5. This is a positive development because it will add some competition into the market. Because effectively for most people, the only test they could do was the IELTS because the OET was mainly for medical occupations. So now there's going to be competition in the market as to which test to do, and hopefully people will be able to find it a little bit easier to get through the English testing, but that's yet to be seen. The new tests will be acceptable for a range of the GSM visas, including the 489, the 190 and the 189. In addition to that, they'll be available for the employer-sponsored visas, the 186 and the 187. Plus there's another whole bunch of visas which will be acceptable. A big exception at the moment is the 457, but this must be, might change because the 457 visa has been under review, and it might be that if some of the recommendations of that 457 review come through, then more English tests will be available for the 457 as well. So my comments on this area. The first thing is the tests, which is going to be the easiest. What's the test that's going to become the most popular? I would foresee that potential applicants are going to try the range of tests, and that it's quite likely that one of them will emerge as the favourite test, and that one will be the one that most of the people take. So it's difficult to know which test it will be at the moment, but I suppose it's just a case of keeping your ear to the ground to hear what's going on. In addition to that, there's some extra stresses. What that's about is some of these tests don't have a huge amount of test dates at the moment. So they're opening in November, taking applications, skilled applications based on these tests. But at the moment, from what I could see online, some of these tests are only offering one test a month in some states of Australia. So potential applicants, I'd say if you're looking at using one of these new tests, the first thing you might want to do is to quickly book one of these tests and start practicing, because they might get booked out very quickly. And if you remember back a few years, there was a huge problem with IELTS tests getting booked out and people having to wait months, fly interstate or overseas to take an IELTS test. So hopefully the new range of tests will, there'll be enough tests put on and people will be able to access them easily, but there might be some teething problems. Onshore partner visa application processing times soar. Well, the headline for this is pretty much the whole story. It's not good news. For a number of reasons, or speculative reasons, which could include the large number of working holiday visa makers in Australia, and also the difficulty of applying for some other skilled visas, there has been a surge in applications for partner visas. This is resulting in much longer processing times for onshore applications, which is bad news for onshore applicants. When you go to the immigration site and check the processing times, when you go on the onshore partner application, there's now a warning that average processing times are 12 to 15 months. That's bad news. Not long ago, it was, I think it was 5 to 8 months for onshore applications. So it's gone up a huge amount. My concern is when processing times go up that quickly, that if the applications keep piling in, then processing times could totally blow out. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but it's possible they could blow out to over 2 years, 3 years. So that's about immigration funding, how many people are processing them, and the volume of applications. But I'm certainly worried about the processing times for partner visas onshore, and I hope that the Department of Immigration does everything it can to keep those processing times reasonable, but that's the news for the moment. Many government reviews. So it seems like with every passing month there's another government review into visa applications. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, because some of these reviews might produce better criteria, or hopefully cut red tape, as some claims have been made. But I can currently list the reviews that are ongoing. The 457 review has been undertaken. I'm going to comment on that in more detail soon. The subclass 400 review is underway, so that's a large number of visas are covered by that. The Business Innovation and Investment Visa Review is underway, and just recently announced is the fee review. So all these reviews are being undertaken, and I'll keep you updated on what they have to say. The 457 review. So the recommendations of the 457 review have recently been released. There are 22 recommendations. I'm going to go through some of them shortly. The most important thing to remember at the moment is that these things are recommendations. So they haven't been implemented, and the 457 visa requirements for the sponsor, for the nominated position, and for the applicant are still currently all the same as they were. The reason that I mention this is because I've received a lot of inquiries from a lot of excited people about perhaps reduction in requirements for English or more flexible positions, but none of these recommendations have been implemented yet. So I'm looking forward to some of these being implemented, but at the moment none of them have been put into place. So here are the most significant of the recommendations. The labour market testing requirements be abolished? Well, that's pretty self-explanatory, and that would be welcomed by many employers and visa applicants. A more flexible and adaptive approach to adding occupations to the 457 list, the CSOL list, due to limitations of the current ANZSCO occupations. So this does sound like a positive recommendation. However, it sounds like it also involves a lot of discretion and decision making and flexibility by the department, and it would be surprising if some changes along those lines were made. That there be an exemption from the market rate, which cuts in at 180,000, which is the top tax rate. No rises in the TISMIT of 53,900 in the next 2 years. This would be a very positive recommendation. It's come to fruition. There hasn't been a rise in the current year, and it would be great if that was the case next year. There is a recommendation that the current training fund contribution system should be replaced with a new system. The details of that are yet to follow. There is a recommendation that the English language requirements be amended to an average score. For example, in relation to an international English language testing system, the 457 applicant should have an average of 5 across all 4 competencies. That would be a very positive development, because at the moment many people struggle to get all 5s, and that might be the case even when they're getting some quite high scores. There might still be one score where they're getting 4.5. In relation to sponsorship, that the standard business sponsor should be approved for 5 years and the startup business for 18 months. This would also be a positive recommendation. There are also a whole bunch of recommendations which are about supporting inter-agency cooperation in relation to monitoring and keeping track of what business sponsors are doing, and these may lead to greater burdens on the employer. So I've gone through the main recommendations out of the 22 recommendations. My impression is that there's a lot of positive recommendations there, but we just have to see how many of them get implemented. Hopefully they do, particularly in relation to making it a little bit easier in terms of English language requirements. The fee review. So Scott Morrison has announced that there's going to be a review of fees. His overall commentary has been that fees were put up by a very large amount by the previous Labor government, and that this needs to be reviewed. I'm quite happy with the sentiment that fees might be reviewed and that they may be decreased. However, I would be quite surprised if there was significant decreases in fees. So let's hope there are, keep our fingers crossed, but I'm not so sure if it's going to happen. Victoria is putting state sponsorship of ICT Occupations on hold. So this is some negative news, and don't be surprised if other states follow with similar measures. What I'd say is, if you do have a positive skills assessment for an ICT occupation, then it's best to see if you can get a state sponsorship or get an application in sooner rather than later, because it's quite likely other states will be closing up their lists or making criteria more difficult for similar occupations. So it's certainly a story to keep watching, and if you do have a positive skills assessment, then it might be time to look at putting an application in. Tasmania, a great place to study and migrate. So we may as well finish off with a positive story. I was recently lucky enough to be involved in organising a conference in South Australia, which was Regional Migration Perspectives. There was attendance by a number of migration agents and also from some of the state and territory skilled migration departments. One of the people that attended and was also a presenter was Hiroko, who's from Tasmania, and she's the manager of their business and skilled migration area. And she did a presentation on what Tasmania has to offer in terms of as a state, as a destination, and also in terms of skilled migration. And it was a very interesting presentation because Tasmania is very interested in increasing the number of students coming to study in their state, and making sure that there's good options for skilled migration in Tasmania. And so what I took away from that is that Tasmania is a fantastic place to study as an international student, and that the Tasmanian government, probably more so than any other state or territory in South Australia, is willing to sponsor graduates for skilled migration. So what I'd say about that is, if you study something on the CSOL and you can get a positive skills assessment and you can get the required English levels, then there's a very strong chance that the Tasmanian government might sponsor you as a skilled migrant. So maybe you should consider it. Tasmania may be a great option for you. So that's the migration news for the moment. I'm Chris Johnston from Work Visa Lawyers, and I'm looking forward to keeping you updated with regular Australian migration news over the coming months. Thanks a lot.